In the previous video, I showed you what the engine sounded like and how the piston was hitting the head and it was not going to stay together long. So we finally got around to pulling the engine out of the truck and taking on that task of swapping the motors out. We faced challenges doing this as well. We started out, we went to Harbor Freight and picked up one of their 2-ton engine hoists, and we got it home and started putting it together, and the small support beams that are on the side of it, there's a hole drilled through the center bar that they're supposed to, you bolt it all together to help support it. Well, they didn't line up, and we tried it first without the bars on the side, and all it was doing was just bending the engine hoist. So it took us a while because we didn't have the right size drill bit. It's a pretty good size, like a 3/4 inch bolt that runs through. So it took us a while with a deburring tool to ream the hole out where everything lined up and get that all squared away. And then it was on to the task of pulling the engine out. And as you can see, it took a little bit of time, but it turned out well. Now, I did not record each step thoroughly, but before you pull the engine, you've got to crawl under the vehicle and disconnect the drive shaft, and we had to pull the exhaust off so it wouldn't tear up anything like that, and make sure to pull the shifter out of the transmission so you don't tear a hole through your floor pan. And you also have to disconnect it from the transmission from the cross member, and disconnect it or pull the bolts out of the motor mounts, so that way you're able to lift the engine freely out. Otherwise you're just going to start picking the truck up. It started getting a little nerve-wracking at this point because our engine hoist had already given us some issues, and how high we were having to pull the motor up and the transmission to clear the radiator support was a little nerve-wracking, to say the least. Looking back, we could have and probably should have just pulled the radiator core support and the grill out so we wouldn't have to lift it up so high, but it worked, and the engine hoist held on, thankfully. At this point, as you can see, we've already pulled the motor out, and the motor and the transmission are sitting on the ground. So from here I pulled the bell housing and the transmission off, and then followed by the clutch, pressure plate, and the flywheel. So we were able to set the engine down in the engine cradle that we purchased from Jegs. Before the motor was ready to go in the engine cradle, we had to drain both the oil and the remaining water and antifreeze out of the block, so that way we wouldn't make a mess all over the floor with it just sitting there. And it also made it easier for when we go to tear it down in the next video, that the fluids have already been drained out of it. Thanks for watching. If you have any questions or comments, leave them down below, and I'll try to get back to you as quickly as I can. And I hope you liked the video, and if so, give it a thumbs up, and also subscribe if you have not yet already.